Hello and welcome back to Soul Speak. I'm Meg Michelson. Thank you for joining me. I'm in Wisconsin, and yesterday and today we had snow. And that's so normal for April in Wisconsin. For a lot of you that are Wisconsin listeners, always kind of makes me, it always makes me laugh because there's something magical about snow and spring, which is the time we're in. It is spring. So welcome back and thank you again for being here. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sending in comments and questions. Also appreciated. As I said, it is springtime, and this is a great time, of course, for spring cleaning, both our homes, our offices, our cars, everywhere else. Also, this is a great time to clean out the clutter, those cobwebs in our mind. Because sometimes we forget, we have to clean out our mind just as much as we might do a physical cleanse. The mind is just important because the mind often runs what's going on in the physical body. Remember, when we change our thoughts, we are changing our lives, good or bad. So we're still in Aries season, and there's so much potential this month for disruption, many levels in our lives. We have a Mercury retrograde. We have a big eclipse on the 8th of April. And those things do affect us. We've talked about this before. My belief, just like the moon affects the oceans and the tides. And of course, most of our body is water. So all of that movement does affect us. And there is the potential, like I said, for a lot of disruption, especially communication in relationships, but also when there's this big energy that can be jagged, it's communicating with ourselves. We sometimes are running thoughts and we don't even know where they came from. And those mishaps that start in our life, whether those are forgetting things or car accidents or communication mishaps with relationships, those start with our thoughts. Those start with those stories that we are running in our own beautiful minds. We can be very stuck in those past patterns and not even recognize it, not even realize that those past beliefs, those past patterns are so old. Where did they even come from? And why do I still feel them? Why do I still believe them? Why do I still say them? We might not even realize that we have been holding on to a belief since early childhood, and it doesn't even pertain to the life we're currently living. Recently, I had a session with a beautiful woman in her early 70s. She carries a lot of everyday stress. She carries a lot of have to do things by myself, have to do things the right way. And that adds so much tension, of course, in our physical body and our mind, all the clutter. All the things that she's noticing she's doing, she's feeling like are hard. She did happily say that I could share some of the session with all of you listeners, so thank you. As a reminder, our beliefs transfer into our thoughts, and they can hurt or help our being. And as you all know, stress does a number on our emotional, our mental, our physical bodies, as well as the way it interrupts our connection to our intuition, our connection to our faith and our hope, our connection to spirit if we allow it to. To work through some of the old thought patterns, I had this woman write down during a session each old thought as it came to her, the ones that get in her way. And then we went through each statement to get to where it came from and the truth, so she could break out of that illusion and flush those old cobwebs out of her head. Some of those beliefs she was subconsciously telling herself that she really didn't even consciously believe anymore, by the way, when she was writing them down and we were working through them. She's like, wow, I don't even believe that one. I am not deserving. Who am I to deserve a good life? Because she had a pretty good life, but she felt guilty for it. I have no freedom. Life is supposed to be hard. Life is a hard slog. If it's not hard, I must be doing it wrong. Let's look at those. How many things do we do during our day that are not hard? How many? And how many do we do that are actually hard? Those things that we're doing that are not hard, are we doing those wrong? Most of the thing when I think about my day, I wake up, I let my dogs out, I make coffee, I climb back in bed and have my first cup of coffee. And then I meditate. All of those things are really easy. And because they're easy, am I doing them wrong? So those stories we tell ourselves can really have a physical, an emotional, a soulful connection in an unhealthy way to our being and really hold us back from living a beautiful life that we're meant to live. Because then the things that might be challenging seem so arduous because those little things we're telling ourselves are hard. That early imprinting makes a big difference. It's important to remember that. I'm not a believer in going back into your history and getting stuck there and blaming everything on our childhood. But that early imprinting she had, that life is hard, where did that come from? Well, the truth was that we got down to was she walked on eggshells in her home because there would be trouble if she did things wrong. So it wasn't the action that was hard. It was the energy around her when she was trying to complete a task. Because if I didn't do it right, I would get yelled at, or maybe I'd get hit. And the right way often changed based on the mood of her parents. So life was really unpredictable for her as a child. She walked on eggshells in her home. How many people is that the norm? That they're a little afraid of being wrong at home or being yelled at home. And that goes right in conjunction with, who am I to deserve a good life? You know, the feelings of not having our emotions or our time or our gifts matter when we were children. And it's not to go back and slam our parents. That's not what this is about. But when we are raised in an environment where we're not necessarily heard and our gifts don't matter and our voice might not matter and we're not allowed to talk through our emotions, that can really cause us to feel undeserving of having a good life. So it's just easier because we're stuck in that old thought pattern of having a life that we suffer. When we allow ourselves to treat ourselves less than, we're continuing the legacy of the mistakes of our parents and their parents. And we can choose to end that cycle at any time. You know, like I said, it's not about making them wrong or staying in victim mentality. It's about deserving or not deserving. It's about that we have one physical body, one lifetime, and one shot to live this lifetime well. Suffering brings in more suffering. And it does not help us. It does not help our life. And it definitely does not help our world. It doesn't help anyone around us. Now, regardless of your age, after you're an adult, yes, we can still connect with our parents and look to others for advice. However, now, as an adult, we are our own parent. We get to choose what our belief system is. And hopefully, we are also our own best friend. Of course, that doesn't mean you don't have other best friends, but you really want to befriend yourself in a healthy way. With every statement you write down, if you choose to do this exercise, put your hand on your upper belly and then say that statement out loud. For her statement, life is supposed to be hard. She realized that her current life is really easy for the most part, like it is for most of us. You know, all of us have hard stuff for sure. And she had a few hard patches that she had to go through recently. But she recognized that most of her day is really quite free and easy. She chooses. She doesn't not have freedom. She has freedom to choose what she wants to do. It's those hard thoughts that she doesn't have freedom and that life is hard that causes her a lot of anguish. And honestly, when we ask ourselves, most of us have it much easier than many other people out there. When we're doing this work, when you're going to write down the statements, notice the jaw, the neck, the back of the head, the forehead. Because when we're thinking too much, especially those tense thoughts that are not bringing us goodness, those areas are really tight. And that blocks our creative problem solving. It blocks the truth. It allows that illusion, those stories that don't serve us, to hold too tight. And then remember, because our soul is always trying to talk to us, that causes the tension, the physical restriction in our body. So in order to grow into empowered beings, and you would not be listening to this podcast if you did not want to grow your life into a more empowered state, we want to keep going back to the truth. Truth will always set us free. That old saying, so darn true. The truth will always set us free. Another statement that she said was about yoga. She told herself she didn't have time to take a yoga class. Working through it, she realized it really wasn't about the time. It was that she would be too embarrassed to be in a yoga class because she didn't feel like her body would do the things the other people's bodies were doing. She'd look silly. I want you to think about that. When we don't take the risk and do the thing we are called to do, we feel that nudge, our body's telling us, our soul is telling us, give that a try. Does that potential to look silly really outweigh the disappointment with self? We get that disappointment with self. It resides in our third chakra, in our upper gut. That's our self-esteem center. And when we're not doing that thing we're called to do, and we can pretend we don't have time, truly, that starts to weigh our body down. That is more powerful than the embarrassment you might feel when you finally go to the class and realize people are too involved in their own self to even care what you're doing. And even if they are, it passes. You know, one of my good friends urges me to get up and sing and play an instrument at open mic. I don't feel like I have a good singing voice anymore, and I don't know how to play an instrument. But part of me was really wanting to do that. Not there yet, but I'm taking an instrument and working through the feelings of getting on stage and singing. It's not even a stage. Because if I don't take the risk at some point or even try, I'm letting my potential to look silly, that self-esteem issue, get in the way of the freedom it might be to get up there and sing and play my ukulele or the piano. So when you're in a situation where you're telling yourself you can't do something, I want you to pause and say both statements. I don't have time to go to yoga. And then the truth, I'm embarrassed to go to yoga. And then the third one you want to say is, not going to yoga is really getting in my way. Notice which of those feels heavier. Tell ourselves the truth. And taking those risks really does provide freedom after we get over the initial shock of the embarrassment, which goes away. She told me the beliefs that have been getting in her way are feeling like shackles. And of course, there are layers. And we just continue to release them. It doesn't matter if we're 15 or 18 or 40. We have layers of these old beliefs, those old cobwebs in our beautiful minds that are getting in our way. And if we take the time to release them, it does make a difference. It takes a while to build up that armor. And those beliefs, they do go away, but it takes a while to let them melt away. And it takes more than one try usually. We can even have an aha, then we have to practice it. I get that's not the truth. But now I got to practice that so I can learn that new pathway. We can all be too protective of our heart, too protective of our shell. Protection is absolutely necessary. However, we want to be mindful of how unnecessary the armor really is. So it's always situational. We don't want to wear the same armor every single situation, because we're now becoming too thick. Another statement I want to bring up, and I hear this from a lot of clients, those that are single. I'm never going to have a good partner. I'm never going to choose, or that right partner is never going to find me. That's such a limiting belief. Look back at how many partners, if you're single, how many partners have you had? And how long did you let them stay with you before you told yourself the truth that they weren't the right one? And how many times did you give someone else a try, or did you just stop? Trying to make something fit doesn't work in the long run. So telling ourselves the truth about who we're dating, why we're dating them, and really being proactive in that world helps you be open to the right partner that you want in the long run. My old history was to choose partners that were emotionally distant, and I'd get hooked in too fast. And that emotional distance caused me to feel even less than and want them more. That's a dysfunctional patterning. And then it would take me a while to end it, or it would take me a while to release that person because why? My self-esteem was hooked in there. So think back to when you ended it with a significant partner. And that significant partner could be 2 weeks, 2 months, 5 years. It's significant in our heart and how much of our self-esteem we put on them or how important we thought they were. You thought you might never get over that pain. And you'd always love that person and you'd always want them back. So go beyond the last person you ended it with. Go back from 5 or 10 or 20 or 40 years ago to that person from a long time ago that you ended it with. Did you get over it? Of course you did, because you had someone that was 2 years ago or a year ago or 4 months ago. Do you still want that person from 20 or 40 years ago? We want to go into the truth. We get stuck on someone and think we're never going to love again. Old belief. Yet you do love again. We always can love again. About 8 years ago, I thought, it was after my divorce, of course, I thought I was in love with somebody, very powerful man, coincided with the death of my dad. And those two reminded me of each other for some reason, many reasons. And when we ended it, it hurt beyond anything I thought I could feel. It really was painful for me. It took me a few years to work through until I got to the truth of the situation. Layers, of course, layers upon layers, right? And who that man was in comparison to what I really would want in a partner. But he had so much charisma and so much power that he also, my fault, not his, my self-esteem went right with him. And of course, it took me a while to work through all of that illusion that was built up. I wouldn't go back to him if he ever reapproached me. He's not even someone I would want anymore because he didn't even meet my love list. However, it was that strong charm. So we want to be careful with that. We don't want to date someone that holds our self-esteem. That's not healthy. And then we can always unhook. And it took me a little while to love myself enough to stop thinking I wasn't enough. That's an old illusion. We can break free of those old cobwebs. So if you look back on who you're still connected to that wasn't even good to you, break free of that. And bring that now to your last breakup. The one that you just recently had, your most recent. Remember how you got over that old person. Bring that into the now. Let yourself tell yourself the truth. Don't put your self-esteem in anyone else's hands, including going to a yoga class or not, because what will people think of me? It's all the same energy. It's all the same. We want to give ourselves our cup. We want to hold our own self-esteem. Now, hopefully, we value ourselves for who we are more than we value the partnership. It's so important. Value self first. Because instead of focusing on missing that person or what you could have done different, every time you're doing that, you're creating resistance, by the way. Remember, we talked about last week, the static, like the radio station. So when we are stuck on what I did or didn't do for that person or what I did wrong or holding on to that, we're causing that static. And we are not allowing ourselves to clear our field, clear out the cobwebs. Doesn't mean you don't feel pain. We don't want to pretend the pain isn't there. We want to work through the pain in any of our old patterns, including my client who really didn't feel like she deserved a good life. That's pain. Pain is real, and pain passes. It always will if we allow it, if we work through it. If we choose to let our mind stay stuck in it, we can carry it for our whole lifetime. Bad things happen to all of us. Suffering is a normal part of everyone's life to some extent, absolutely. And loss is part of every human experience. There's no escaping suffering. There's no escaping loss. However, we get to choose how we're going to handle it based on how much work we have done to love and value ourselves. What level are we at? So we can learn to control the thoughts. So we can learn to understand we will always be okay. We will always be okay. It's a choice in what we are allowing ourselves to continue to think. We are really powerful beings. I want to just read a couple sentences from a book one of my sisters got me a few years ago by John C. Maxwell, The 15 Invaluable Lessons of Growth. The potential that exists within us is limitless and largely untapped. When you think of limits, you create them. Have you maxed out your capacity? Have you reached your full potential as a person? I believe that if you are reading this, the answer is no. I believe that if you are listening to the podcast, you believe you have a lot more coming in your life, a lot more goodness you can stretch to, a lot more goals you can attain. We want to clean out the cobwebs so we can get there. So important, that spring cleaning. And if you are still hurting from something that happened 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or 5 years ago, it is truly time to work through it. Work through that emotional pain. Take the time to tune into your own beauty, your own power, your own greatness, what you offer. Build your love of self. God, we are amazing. Humans are amazing. We want to remember how amazing we are. Truly. Once you unleash that, there is nothing you can't do. So how can we make these belief shifts for the long haul? Remember that in order to change our beliefs, we have to change our thoughts. In order to change the thoughts, we have to mindfully take the time to change the thoughts. It's that simple. In order to change the beliefs, we have to change the thoughts. In order to change the thoughts, we have to take the time to change the thoughts. They don't just go away. So you can start by writing down those statements that are getting in your way. Something you want to do, write it down. Easier to witness it once we write it down, and then we can look at what's the illusion and what's the truth. Do I even believe this anymore? Be as consistent as possible and make time for the healing. It is important to be consistent. And that doesn't mean every moment of every day, because we're human and we're certainly not going to be consistent of every moment of every day. But overall, take the time to be consistent with training your mind. Find someone to mentor you. It's important to align with a mentor, someone you know that walks the talk, someone you know that's trying to live the truth, that you can trust to talk to, that you can ask for advice, that you know they'll be honest. This can be a friend, a therapist, a family member. Notice what you're watching on television. Notice what you're reading. Notice what you're listening to. Do those things that are putting you in alignment with what you want to do. Remember that saying, dress for success. Same thing with our mind. If you want a successful and powerful mind, if you want to live a life of love and beauty and truth and goodness, then you want to tune into those things and those people. And take little risks. Try small new things every week. Big one, use your 5 senses. I cannot urge this enough. It's amazing how much time we can pass and we don't even know what something smelled like or tasted like or looked like. Use those 5 senses. Put time on your calendar for your hobbies and relaxation. Check in with your physical body. Ask your body what it needs and wants. Our body's always talking to you. I've said this a lot. I will always say it. Our body is always trying to talk to us. Tell yourself the truth. We sometimes have to dig for the truth, but man, is it worth it. Tell yourself the truth. So much goodness comes. And sometimes there's pain there, of course. But in order to really have a great life, we have to have the truth first. And of course, you can always work with me. I'll always tell you the truth in a kind and loving way. Now, I recently saw a short on Instagram from Mayim Bialik. I hope I said that right, Mayim Bialik. She said, when you love yourself enough and value yourself enough, when you understand your needs enough, you will no longer find that you are attracted to people that cannot fulfill those things for you. And I want to add on to that with, you can let those people go without anger or making them wrong. You just know the vibrational match is not correct because either they're not living a healthy life or they're not valuing you. Don't let them cause you to not value you. Go back to the truth. They're not in line with your energy. And that rings just as true for statements and beliefs, not just people. Those statements and beliefs that it's time to shift. When we love ourselves enough and value ourselves enough, we understand our needs enough. So we no longer let those old beliefs, we no longer let those people into our inner circle that support those old unhealthy beliefs that clog our mind. Don't let those old beliefs clog your mind. When you do this work, when you really pay attention to what you're thinking and how you're living, those old things just won't stick any longer. So take a nice big inhale, hold it for a moment, and a slow exhale out your mouth. Let it go. Have a beautiful week. Enjoy the rest of the beginning of spring. And I look forward to connecting with you next Wednesday. Thanks again for being here. Hey, listeners, thanks again for joining me. If you want to learn more about me, services I offer, who I am, please check out my website, megmichelson.com. Also there you can join my newsletter. Follow me on Instagram and YouTube. Thanks again for coming. I'll see you next time.